For over 35 years, Todd Garner has overseen blockbuster films like Con Air, Anger Management, Triple X, 13 Going on 30, and the Mortal Kombat franchise.
Why are they letting you make these movies?
Join Todd as he shares tips and stories from the front lines of producing in Hollywood.
I'm Adam Sandler.
I'm Rebel Wilson.
This is Jeff Probst.
I'm Kaylee Cuoco.
I'm Eli Roth.
This is Marlon Wayans.
Hey, it's Ed Helms.
This is Shay Mitchell.
Hey everybody, this is Kevin James, and this is The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide with Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
What a combination.
Welcome to the Producer's Guide podcast. I'm Todd Garner, and today we have a very exciting episode. It looks at the world of entertainment through brand partnerships. James Crane is Director of Business Development at Sugar 23, highlighting their commitment to building strong relationships with brands and empowering them to create meaningful, original content that resonates with audiences. In the past year, Sugar 23 has made significant strides in the branded arena, launching multiple brand-centric studios and hosting The Way Upfront, a unique summit for brand marketers featuring early-stage entertainment projects presented by A-list producers and talent. Founded in 2017, Sugar 23 has partnered with notable brands like Starbucks, and their impressive roster includes award-winning projects such as Spotlight, The Nick, and 13 Reasons Why. So let's dive in and explore the intersection of branded content and storytelling with our guest, James Crane. I wanted to have him on today because I've been following him on Instagram, and he is a positive, optimistic viewpoint about the business and how brands can actually infuse much, much needed capital. Enjoy. All right, I'm here with James Crane. Hello, James. How are you today, brother?
Hello. Good. Good to see you, Todd.
I wanted to reach out to you today and have you on because I've been very impressed with your internet presence about the business, where you see things are headed, the overall level of optimism, which is very rare in this climate, albeit it's not necessarily a straightforward traditional route that you're talking about. But I want to talk a little bit about your past and kind of how you got to Sugar 23 and kind of the decisions you made along the way to switch into a slightly different way of looking at media. So walk me through kind of your early upbringing and kind of what got you into the business.
Yeah, I mean, look, and Todd, first off, I appreciate you reaching out. When you initially started the podcast, it was one of those shows that I would listen to literally religiously. I was newer in the business and I just wanted to figure out everything I could about the business, especially from the producer's angle. So first off, I appreciate you and appreciate you bringing it back. At a time where we need more positivity. But the way I got into this business was I grew up in Chicago. You know, you're in school and nothing is interesting to you. The one thing that really kept me going was I loved getting home and watching movies and television shows. That was the reality. And I loved getting people together. I was an avid party thrower in high school, not for the sake of what you do at parties, but for the sake of getting people together. That's what I've always loved to do. And one of my favorite shows growing up was Entourage. Right? Just like everybody's. And I watched that show and I thought to myself, wow, that's a job. You can be an agent. Like, that is so cool. Maybe I don't want to act that way. They act in the show, but like, if that's a job, that sounds cool to me. And I ultimately went to Montana State, which was an experience. I ultimately ended up, leaving that school, went back to Chicago, and, all my friends were having experiences at different colleges. And I was sitting there sort of lonely, trying to think to myself, what can I do right now? What can I do? And ultimately, I made the decision when I was 21 years old to just get on a plane, go to California. I had no idea what this business entailed. I didn't know anybody that was in it. Where I grew up, nobody really went to entertainment. They went to finance or investment banking and this. So when I came out here, again, your podcast was a big piece of this because it was a lot of learning from me through you and the guests that you would have on. You get in here and you just network your ass off and you hustle. You get a lot of no's, you get a lot of emails. My favorite response to this date, when I would email everybody, I'd start at 7 a.m., sorry. And I had one of those old phone books where it has every single studio exec. I'm pretty sure I emailed you too. But I had every single studio exec, manager, agent, and I would just go row by row, just emailing everybody. But the But the different thing that I did was I was never asking for a job, right? I didn't want any handouts. All I wanted was like 15 minutes of someone's time to just know what I need to know what I don't need to know, and figure out a lane from there. So I just hustled and hustled and hustled. And ultimately what happened was, and this is a true story, I was up in Mandeville Canyon in Brentwood, and I was probably like a week away from giving up. Nothing was gaining traction. It just felt like failure over and over and over again. And I got an email one day out of the blue from a big director, who said, "Can you be at the lot in 30 minutes?" Right. And I'm in Mandeville Canyon. I forgot what studio this was, but it's far. So I was with my friends and I said, "What do I do right now?" And they said, "You get in your car, you just fucking go."
Right.
So I race down Mandeville Canyon and I get to the studio and I'm thinking to myself, like, this can't be true. Like, this can't be happening. I go through security. I'm like, well, that's miracle number one. They actually let me in. And then I go where they tell me to go, where this director is editing a big movie, a very big movie. And my name is on one of the plaques right there for a parking spot. And again, I'm 21 years old and this is crazy to me. So I go in, the assistant comes out to get me, brings me in. And this director gives me, 15 minutes of his time to ask whatever he wanted me to ask. I was just asking him all these questions. And I said at the end, like, why did you respond to my email? And he said, because many years ago, I was doing the same thing you are. And someone took a shot on me and gave me some time. And it gave me, it re-energized me. And now I'm here making this massive studio movie. So if I can do it, you can do it. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
So it snowballed from there. And what made you ultimately decide the agency route was a route that you wanted to take?
So I tried my hand at film school in Hollywood, the LA Film School, and I wanted to be a director, right? I thought that's what I wanted to do. So I was in school, and really what happened was, I'm probably 6 months into that school year, and we have the big thesis project, right? You make your big movie, right? And I showed my movie. I put a lot of time and effort into it, and I showed my movie to the class, and nobody liked it. Nobody liked it. No claps. There's probably a room of 40 people, and you could just, the energy in the room was just sucked out of the room because my film was so bad. And I had a really close professor at that time. And I was always the person on campus that was connecting people, right? So, hey, you're a writer. There's a director. You guys should go link up. Hey, you're a producer. Well, they're a director. Hey, you're an actor. They're shooting something over here. You should go shoot, or you should go make something. And my professor noticed that, and professors on campus noticed that. And they ultimately told me, maybe you should go the agency route. We try to become a representative because you're always connecting people and you're always moving fast. And obviously to be a director, patience, you got to stay with the vision for, many, many years. And I was just kind of like ADD in a way.
Was that movie finished before you met with the director, or did you start that after you met with the director?
This was briefly after. I tried my hand at film school and I almost left immediately.
Do you remember the first question that you asked when you met the famous director?
I mean, yeah. Well, first off, I was blown away. I was watching him edit this movie where everyone knows this movie. I'll give you a hint, it's a franchise. And first of all, I was just blown away, and I just looked at him because I knew his background. I did my research, and I said, "How did you get to this point?" That's the first thing I said when he sat down right next to me. And then that's when we got into everything. And he just said, because I just willed it into existence. That's what he said to me. I was like, that's a badass answer. Willed it into existence. And that's really been my career thus far. I don't really take no for an answer in terms of the stuff that we're trying to get done, especially as an agent. Like, that is your job, to turn no's into yeses. So really after that, I started emailing some more after I left film school, different representatives, and a manager by the name of Daryl Marshak, if you know that name. And he took a shot at me. I was 22 years old, and he taught me the business. And then also what happened was he decided to fold his management company. And I was like, well, that was short-lived. Like, I was so excited. I'm a representative now. But he had a friend that he wanted me to meet, a guy named Peter Young, who ran a company called Sovereign Talent Group, which is a boutique agency. So I went there, and that's where I really learned the business. I was representing a ton of actors. We were having a lot of success. But ultimately, I like to build things, right? And I knew that they would hit a certain ceiling. It's no knock on him at all or the agency, but there's just no denying what a bigger agency will bring you in terms of resources. So, I met all the usual suspects that and the reason I chose Buchwald was I love the story of Don Buchwald. I had so much respect for his career and his legacy and what him and Howard Stern built together specifically. I love that thesis of being in there with your client from the beginning until the end and building an incredible business and just having fun together, right? So I chose the company because I also respected Julia Buchwald and I respected Ryan Martin. Um, and that was for sure the right decision. So I was there for over 6 years and I started out in our independent film department and looked to like build that out. So I was the one that sent to all the film festivals. I represented actors, writers, directors, and we were having a lot of fun, a lot of success. But this business changes very fast. I like to read trends. I'm constantly scrolling on Apple News or talking to people about what's happening. Like what little kernel can you give that can give me a blueprint into what's going to happen, 6 months from now. And the pandemic hits and our world shuts down, right? Our world shuts down. But I kept seeing the rise of athletes, right? Wanting to build media companies and build their companies for when they leave their profession. So I'm 26 at this time, and I come up with this crazy idea of, you know what? Buchwald's really well positioned because they're a full service agency, but we don't have athletes. What if I start and launch the sports department? So one of the first clients I signed was Jay Cutler, who used to play for my Chicago Bears. And, after that, we launched and we had a lot of success almost out of the gate because we weren't looking to be a competitor to anybody because we weren't doing player contracts. We were specifically helping them out with media and entertainment careers. So we were having amazing managers around town, around the sports community, introing us to great athletes and clients across all different sports, Olympians. And that was a lot of fun. And that ties into, what happens at Sugar 23 and how we got there. But that's just a little. And then during that point at Buchwald, I was leading our sports department. I was working with brands, working with tourism boards and governments, actors, writers, directors, executives from the biggest brands in the world, companies who want to be more entertainment facing. So my world really became a world where I was seeing things at the highest level from all these different aspects of entertainment, media, business, tech. And then it kind of all leads to that moment to Sugar 23.
And so did you have the idea when you went to Sugar 23? Did you go with that idea to Sugar 23? Because at Buchwald, you're representing athletes. You're seeing that brands don't just want to have a face on their ad or their brand. They want to build a story out. And so using an athlete is a good way to tell a story, whether it's some athlete with a watch, why that watch? What's the story? Or shoes or sports drinks. It can't just be, oh, I think this tastes good. There's a story behind it. And so you were starting to see at that level brands wanting to tell stories and wanting to do more than just the traditional advertising campaign. So you have that idea, you've seen that idea implemented into action. Walk me through how you and Michael come together to start this new brand branch of an entertainment company.
Through all my conversations I kept having with brands as an agent, it was usually always the same thing. They want to get more into entertainment, they want to get more ingrained, but they don't know how, and they don't really have the relationships. And there's always been this sort of barrier between brands and Hollywood, right? Hollywood would traditionally go to brands like after the fact, right? A sponsorship or obviously product placement and stuff like that. But they weren't some of the time or most of the time, and they would tell us like they weren't getting their bang for the buck. So really what happened here was I decided to start posting on LinkedIn, right? Not everyone's first choice. But I kept thinking to myself, agents traditionally don't post a lot on social media, right? What you're taught as an agent, which I think is changing a lot now, is you're in the background, right? Your clients are obviously in the forefront, which of course, But I always thought to myself, well, if I was also in the in the forefront, but not in the way that my clients are, but in a way that's more in the business community, well, then I would know more people and more opportunities would come, which I can find for my clients, right? I'll reverse engineer it. So I started posting on LinkedIn, and at first I was like, this is just not going to work. Like, I didn't really understand the platform. I was talking about the industry and things I was seeing. Um, and then what happened was, it's one of those classic stories where you wake up, you go to bed one day posting something, you wake up and it's viral. I decided to make a video on LinkedIn about the future of media and entertainment with the subtitle was, brands as media companies. And this was probably 2.5, 3 years ago. And again, this is at the same time too that I'm seeing Michael Sugar and Sugar 23 with all these big announcements of what they're doing in the space. I read Michael's Fast Company article. I saw some of his interviews. I saw the partnership with Starbucks, and a lot of these in the fifth season. Right, I saw a lot of this stuff, and we were on the same wavelength, but we didn't know each other. Right, all I knew of Michael as an agent was just similar to you, Todd. If I see Michael's name or Todd Garner's name on a project, it's going to be great.
Oh,
That's
thank
what
you.
I knew. I knew I wanted to get my clients into those projects because they're great projects. So again, I made this video, I posted it. I was so uncomfortable. And I went to bed and, woke up and it was viral. And Michael and I connected. I got a lot of people reaching out that had similar philosophies on where this business is heading. And, Michael and I connected and he told me, I'm betting my career on this. We should talk.
And why did Michael come to that conclusion? He was seeing the same thing through his clients. It was a sort of a parallel track. You guys were both heading down and seeing that the more brands were taking the initiative to tell stories to their clients, the more it was becoming obvious that was a really interesting place to start making content, making media.
Yeah. So where it started was, Michael, got a call from somebody at P&G. We produced a show called The Tipping Point with P&G, with like Trevor Noah and a handful of celebrities, a doc series that was incredibly successful. And that's really where it started. And P&G came in as, they were a producer on it. And they obviously, as a producer, they made money and success. And, typically what happens is, these marketing departments are cost centers. They spend a lot of money and hope to get sales in return. And that's what's unfortunate is you're starting to see that department more under the microscope right now because CFOs and CEOs, they're focused on sales and profit and what does marketing actually drive us in terms of revenue and sales. So that's what Michael saw. That's his story that he had, and that's why he really launched this and geared the whole company towards this. And then, the Starbucks happened and this awesome partnership we have with fifth season. And many others, but that's where it all started. So I kept seeing this and we connected and it just became abundantly clear when we connected that we're on the same wavelength here and we want to make this happen because we can get into the rest, but the way we look at this is a solve for everybody. We're looking to make this a solve for anybody. And I know Michael well and the town does. He is just one of those innovators that is a big thinker, but he backs it up with what he does. And, when I asked around town about Michael, it was nothing but positive, amazing things to say, right? So all that coupled with the mission of the company and where my mind was at and what I was hearing on the ground as an agent from these executives, it was like the perfect recipe to join the company, and really drive this thing forward with everybody and pick up the momentum here. And it really has been that ever since, obviously they have done a lot of the groundwork and made a lot of these inroads. But, even in the past year I've been there, it has been unbelievable to see how much interest there is from brands at the biggest level. It has been so wild to see the shift that's happening right now. And you're starting to see headlines more and more, but this is just the early stages.
So when you were having those early conversations with Michael, what was that early mission statement? What was the idea of the company?
It was really to reinvent the way that brands in Hollywood work together, right? Again, like I mentioned, typically brands would be brought in later on, or they wouldn't have any equity in projects. And they would, and they would just advertise and hope for the best against projects. So now the thesis was to bring brands in at the earliest stage, which is development, with projects that actually fit their ethos, their values, their audience, all the things. So we are helping them make and match producers and great producers with brands and helping them make the projects they'd otherwise advertise against. So some of the examples here is like, what if Adidas produced Ted Lasso, right? If you really think about it, if you know Adidas, that show and its value and what it meant and its belief is fully aligned with Adidas. And yes, I mean, the players could wear Adidas jerseys and you could do a little product placement there. But at the end of the day, it's about the story. No one's going to watch a project that's full product placement. No one's going to watch a 2-hour commercial. We don't like to say branded content. We like to say brand backed entertainment because we truly mean it. Because the goal also right here is to make it so undeniable that the distributors will want to buy it. Right. So, and they're not going to buy a 2-hour commercial. They're not going to buy product placement. So that's what we're doing with these brands. And that's why, as you know, we have a network of producers and talent, and we have a lot of brand mandates that we get from these brands. And we've created a system where producers get these mandates in real time from these brands that are looking to spend a lot of money in development. And we match producers. And most of the time, right, if it's the right connection, we don't need to be a part of it. Right? We'll let the producer who bought the project or the talent, wrote the brand, make the thing. That's fine. We're just trying to make this as a solve because this isn't new, right? Soap operas were a thing, right? Brands are getting involved. But what's new about this era and this moment right now is just how much interest and how brands, the distributors, and Hollywood are all on the same wavelength. It's really been, maybe 2 of the 3 or 1 of the 3. Now it's fully aligned. And you're seeing that every day with some of these announcements. And quite frankly, you're going to see more very shortly here from some of the biggest brands in the world launching studios to do exactly this.
So there's a long stream for television and film that goes from development to sales to production to post-production to release. Are the brands indicating they want to be part of the entire stream financially? Or is it, let's develop stuff together, go find a buyer, will be integral into the movie, but we're not going to pay for the movie? Or are you finding that brands want to take it all the way downstream and then try to sell it after the fact? Or is it a mixture of both?
Right now, it's geared towards development, right? So they'll fund the script, they'll fund the sizzle reel, they'll do the development financing. And there are certain aspects where if it's set up at a distributor, right, if a distributor has interest, there are certain situations where a brand will say, well, we'll kick in some more money, for even more equity in the show, and we'll put some money towards production and financing that. But right now, the main interest is around development because that's where, you get the best ROI as a brand, and then you could package early. And really, the way we work with brands is, they trust us, they trust Hollywood, right? This isn't just about us; it's about Hollywood and the ecosystem. They'll have notes on things, right? And there are certain areas where you can, it's like wet clay, right? You have a project and you have a brand involved that's financing developments, and you're the producer on it, or the writer, the showrunner, whoever it may be. They might give notes on, okay, well, can we have the character be, this age because that's really our audience, or can it be in this scene, or can the tone be this way? And that's the beautiful thing about bringing a brand in at the development stage, and that's why they love it as well, because it is wet clay. You can make those changes in development, but the number one thing that's important to understand is, and we're upfront with these brands, and they know this, if it takes away from the story, or if it takes away, from the ability to want to sell this to a distributor, or if it's product placement heavy, or if it's a 2-hour commercial, we will not do this, because it won't be in their best interest either, because no one's going to want to buy a 2-hour commercial thing packed with product placement. But they will buy as organic ways you can integrate those that, again, don't take away from the story and the scene and what's happening with the characters. So that's an important thing to realize, because I see some of these comments on my videos about, well, this is just propaganda, or it's a 2-hour commercial. And I want to address that. And it's the complete opposite. It literally is, what if The White Lotus was produced by the Four Seasons, right? What if The Queen's Gambit was produced by chess.com?
When you say produced, you mean be involved in the development, be integral into the storytelling,
Yes.
as opposed to them being on set saying, you can't hold our product that way.
Yeah, they're studios and they trust Hollywood Jack.
Right. I mean, there are obvious from throughout history, toy companies have done it very successfully between Transformers and Barbie, to be two examples, or video games. I'm doing Mortal Kombat. There's been Minecraft, lots of other video games being done. So those are the Lego. There's obvious brands that have been very successful of successfully integrating in. So what you're saying now is more specifically integrating brands you might not think, like Four Seasons or The White Lotus, or strangely, when we did the second Mall Cop, because Steve Wynn was so adamant about not having like alcohol or gambling or any sort of mention of like strip clubs or prostitution in his with his resort, we put this G-rated family comedy inside the Wynn, and he gave us access to everything. It was fantastic. And that could have been a really nice brand integration from the beginning. It just turned out that was the hotel we used. But you're also saying something like Devil Wears Prada. You could have a clothing brand that could be Prada, by the way, integrated into that. So your goal is to bring the brands in as early as possible, make that integration feel organic, natural, not disrupt the storytelling. And then they'll help develop the movie and perhaps, or TV show, and perhaps kick in some funding down the line. And then in the marketing of that television show, feature, whatever it is, really become integral into getting that out there. Like F1 did it really, really well. Like, F1 was very integrated in everything and throughout that entire process. That's the kind of stuff you're seeing happening. And because you're now doing these videos, you must be very, very bullish on it. What's happening? So it's sort of like a wildfire now. Lots of brands are coming to you saying, we'd like to get involved. And you're then acting as the mediator, the connector, as it were, since you've been throwing parties since high school, connecting these brands to different producers and whatnot to try to get these stories, maybe even feeling like they have a little bit of IP behind them and a little wind in their sails, correct?
Yes. It has been a whirlwind to, I started posting probably, really on Instagram and TikTok and all the rest, 4 or 5 months ago. And it's been insane lately. And, everything I say in these videos is, it is what's happening. I'm not doing these videos to be famous, right? I, just like yourself, with this show and this podcast, like, I saw it so much as an agent, right? We would go into these weekly meetings, our TV meetings, feature film meetings, and you would see the grids of projects get smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's just the nature of the beast, it's the nature of the business. And I have a lot of friends that have been affected by this, right? So I'm very sensitive to the fact that, this is impacting a lot of people. And the reason I do these videos is to make sure people are educated, not only brands, but our industry as well, on the opportunities and how they can capitalize as well. Because again, this is meant to be a solve for everybody. That's what it's meant to be. The industry needs more capital, needs more partners, and the distributors love it, just like you mentioned, because when a brand is involved at that stage, right, really the distributors are leaning on the producers that know how to tell these world-class stories and zeitgeisty stories to make it. And the brands obviously have involvement as well, but yes, those brands will also spend against it. So it actually, distributors like it because it will offset some of the costs of marketing. It will offset the cost of development. It's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, and it's also they're bringing their brand recognition audience to whatever story that the producers and the distributor are telling. Can you walk me through a few of the early deals you guys made and what fruit those deals bore out?
this is before I came. One of the earliest adopters of this as a brand, their innovator, is Chick-fil-A. I was an agent when they came out with their, Chick-fil-A Play app, which is designed to be, a streaming service that they host content on, and you can earn like loyalty points and all these things. So we did a show for them called Play Forward, where it's a competition show where families compete, but when they win, right, that prize money they win actually goes back to somebody in their community back home that's having a tough time, and their story as well. So they're competing for something greater than themselves, and it's again, play it forward, pay it forward. And that show, when it came out, was a tremendous success for the platform, and their viewership spiked. All these things spiked. Inc. did a really interesting article about it as well, and that's another piece that's really important to this. And I'll get into your question. The earned media and the assets you can create around a television show, TV show or a movie. We're talking about premieres, events, obviously, Inc. articles, even the press release alone, right? Just doing like, X brand launches studio and produces this thing with an amazing talent, right? That stuff moves the ticker, the stock ticker, right? It does. But it's not all about obviously earned media. They're all interested in putting together separate funds with a substantial amount of money and as seed capital into amazing projects alongside Hollywood that knows how to do it best. They lean on Hollywood. It's not the other way around. So, look, we've had Chick-fil-A. I mean, and then we have probably, you're going to see a few more announcements come out here shortly with massive brands that are launching studios with a similar mission here. And we have probably a dozen or so projects in development with brands. And what we're seeing, which is interesting, is a lot of these brands love scripted television. You would think they were like, more docs or doc series because it's quicker turnaround, or feature films. But a lot of them are very interested in television, and we're seeing more investments there, more buy-in from brands there, because obviously there's a longer tail. You can do more. It's depending if it's, if it's cable, if it's network, or if it's streaming, you can, chop it up into a different episode. So we're seeing a lot of interest there. And this is across every industry. Like when you mention social media, universities, you're seeing states now, instead of relying on tax incentives, are looking to create funds, not with taxpayer money, with separate funds that inject capital directly into entertainment and back storytellers to bring projects, obviously, but to have equity and upside as well, to either further invest in a bigger slate or further invest in things that their state or city needs. That's what's actually, that's a big thing happening right now. That's what I did a lot of as an agent. I was talking to cities around the country and mayors and policy advisors about this very thing, and now it's heating up. Another industry is universities, because of what's happening in their space with enrollment going down, obviously AI taking a big effect there. They now are looking at themselves, and I had somebody that's a GM at a university a week ago jump on a Zoom with me and say, we need to look at ourselves as a media company now. We need to look at ourselves as a studio. We want to do this. We want to back not just our program and our football or our sports. We want to make, like, what if we made the next Sex Lives of College Girls, right? Well, we'd be fucking cool for that audience, and they probably want to come here. So we're seeing that at a much bigger level because they also have massive endowments, right? So they have unlimited capital. And again, it's about premium storytelling, and you're seeing it across every single industry. The biggest brands in the world.
Well, taking it back to the most basic level, if you think about the Coca-Cola commercials, there was a Coke and a smile. The commercials are very evocative. It created an emotion, and then you connect that emotion to the product, connect that emotion to the brand. And so connecting to feeling and connecting to storytelling is a very effective way to tie a feeling about the brand. And it's better to do it in long form, whether that be a feature or a television series, certainly than a 30-second spot. If you're watching The Notebook, for example, and feeling romantic and feeling all these feelings, and you could somehow connect it organically to brand that didn't feel like it was shilling, then you would see that brand, feel that feeling, think of that brand. So I absolutely get the want of the brands to do this, and I understand from a financial side why it's beneficial to the studios, because any port in a storm, if you can get people to contribute to the bottom line of your movie and mitigate some of that risk, it's always welcome at the studios. But when you say brands want to be studios, define that for me. What does that mean to them? What do they believe being a quote unquote studio is?
Yeah, look, it's studio, building out entertainment arms. I just think studio sounds a little sexier.
No, okay.
Um, but that's so I'll give you an example, right? So we work with Ad Council Entertainment or Ad Council, right? To help them launch Ad Council Entertainment. And for people that don't know the Ad Council, they are a legendary organization that creates PSAs around the biggest issues facing the world today. And their board consists of, some of the biggest CMOs of every brand you could think of. And when we were talking to them, one of their big initiatives is mental health, obviously a big crisis in the world today. And our thinking was, and their thinking too, because we're all aligned on it, was why create a PSA around mental health when you can create the next 13 Reasons Why, which Michael and the company produced, which the vibe and that show was about mental health. And obviously it touched, it touched on a lot of different things, but it appealed to people globally and it really got the word out on mental health. But that's a bigger thing, right? Because Ad Council consists of the biggest brands in the world on their board, that's a buy-in from all of them. And I can tell you that personally, all of those individuals, all these industries are bought into this. So I love that you brought up feeling, because when you really break it all down, that's what this is all about. Any brand leader we talk to, that is the important question. The most important question. What do you want people to feel about you? What do you want the takeaway to be? And you're exactly right. And you know this, I mean, your filmography speaks for itself. Our job is to find a project that matches that feeling. Obviously, it has to be premium. You want to load it with great talent and auspices. But if it matches the feeling of the brand, that's a win. That's a win. So that's actually incredibly important, because I want producers to know this, because we're not looking for projects, and brands certainly are, right? Their problem isn't getting projects. They get projects all day long, every day from people. Their problem is getting the right projects that actually fit what they're looking to do. So we're not, Sugar 23, the way it's designed, isn't, a production management company with a brand division. We are a brand studio, right? We're going full force into this. We've designed the whole company and every department to be about brands and Hollywood, more so making sure our brand partners get what they need in terms of great projects and great connections with the best producers and talent and storytellers in our business. And that's the solve that we're looking to make right there. And that's a decision, Michael made a few years ago, right? He bet this company on this future. And it's starting to work now. It really is. And the avalanche that's about to come, not just for, this isn't just about us. It's about everybody. More capital. I say it in every single one of my videos. More capital, more jobs, more opportunities, more stories. That's what's coming our way. I wholeheartedly believe it, because it's not just about, CPG brands and tech brands and these dissecting all these industries. It's all of them as a whole, creating all these ecosystems. So again, when you asked about studio earlier, it's really just look at it, brands look at it as seed capital and great projects. It's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, well, and the ad business is so confusing right now, because you have pop-up ads, you have ad blockers, you have ways to fast forward past ads. You've got, so the 30-second traditional spot when you were sitting in front of your TV and the most you could do is maybe go get a snack or go to the restroom, you can get around these commercials. So I can see this as a better way to integrate their product in it. And the upside for the creators is, if you have a brand like Barbie is the perfect, North Star of this whole thing. If you have a brand that's so perfectly aligned with the great storytelling and that great feeling, it doesn't even feel like a brand. It just feels like a movie that happens to be about something that you know exists in the same way that Minecraft did. And you would hope that some of that brand, like certainly happened with Minecraft, wears off on you, that people are coming with an audience and a preconceived notion wanting to see this brand be put in a story that moves them in whatever way the creators and the brand decide. So when it works positively, the idea would be, and then we'll get into the deal in a second, but creatively, when it works positively, walk me through how this would work, not in terms of the deal, just in terms of the creative process when it's working great. To walk me through kind of the steps a producer would take to integrate a brand and kind of what would be the positive outcome of this relationship.
Again, we designed the whole company to be a brand, more brand focused, because our whole goal, and when we work with brands, is we get very smart on what they're looking to solve for. And I'm talking about, it could be the smallest thing you can think of in terms of a nugget of an audience or, again, a feeling. We get very smart on what their goals are. Like, what is a win for them, right? What is a win for them in this situation? So again, then we go out there and we find and we work with some of the best producers like yourself to find the best projects that make sense for these brands. And then obviously the brand will review it alongside the producers and determine if it's right for them and what obviously the financial ask is there and what development would look like. And then when that deal, when that deal kind of like, speeding this up a little, but when that deal is secured and everyone's good, then you get into the creative. The brand leans on the producer, right? The producers know what great entertainment is in this medium. So yes, they'll have some notes. So again, like I mentioned before, they might have a note on, a character or a vibe, or maybe there's a scene that maybe doesn't fit with their brand. Maybe it's a little too, out there for them. But you can also fight back as a producer and say, well, this scene is crucial because this is what sets up the next thing and the next thing of events. And brands trust Hollywood. They trust Hollywood, especially the people that have made hits time and time and time again. They trust it. So again, I like to say wet clay a lot because that's what it is. And that's what it is when there's a producer and a brand getting involved at the development stage. It's looking at the creative with the showrunner, the writer, the director. It's all hands on deck, looking at the creative and figuring out where are some ways we could instill, maybe a product, but that doesn't take away. Maybe it's in the background, right? We don't want to take away from actually what's going on in the story. So there's different avenues you can look at in the development stage, and that's why we bring them in early, because we can have those conversations. It's too late when the script's already, when it's already made and sold to a distributor, it's too late. And that's why we're getting so much buy-in from brands, because it's a new way to look at things, and we're bringing them in at an area that they've never been before. They have never been this early on, really, in the creative. Maybe product placement wise, and looking at a script and saying, well, we can, pay money for this placement here. But they've never brought in early and had a seat at the table with creatives and producers and storytellers. And that's why this moment is so exciting for them as well, in addition to us in Hollywood, because it's a new way to look at things for everybody. And then obviously, you go through the traditional route, right? You want to obviously load it up with great talent and get great people to attach. And then you would do it like you do any other project. You'd go out there and find the best suitor for it. Obviously in tandem with the brand. Obviously they're going to have their own audience they want to appeal to. So those are conversations as well. Like, well, does that streamer, that platform, does that get us to this target audience? Then obviously those are conversations. So it's the normal process. It's the same process, but now you just have a new financier and producer in the mix. That's a brand that has an incredible marketing ecosystem that can help get the awareness out even more so with all their channels, with all their experts internally in their marketing departments, and all those avenues they have in terms of their events and experiences and ads and this. So it's the same process, but now you have an excellent partner in a brand that can offset costs and also provide incredible marketing.
Where have you seen it go off the rails? Where can it go sideways? What are some things to look out for if you're thinking about getting into this business so it doesn't go sideways?
We haven't had anything go like sideways, but where the pushback happens, which brands really appreciate and respect, is when you're talking about forced product placement and integration, or having something be so on the nose. Like maybe it's at our store, the scene's at our store, but then it's like, well, if you do a shot of the store and they're in the store, it's like that's just too much. So that's really where we get, and not a lot anymore, maybe in the early days, but that's really where that creative conversation would really happen, where both sides would speak about why this shouldn't be the case, like why we shouldn't have this product here, because you're going to alienate half your audience when they see because the way that I watch things, if I see it loaded with product placement, I kind of think the brand's sold out, or the creative sold out, right? And I'm just like, okay, I'm like, now I'm like, okay, I don't want to watch that anymore. Like that's how I watch things. So that's where some of the pushback comes, but it's getting less and less common now. But later down the stream and all that, I haven't really seen a lot of pushback or things fall apart when that's solved. Because when that's solved, it solved everything. Because at the end of the day, they just want a great story that's something they can be proud of, and that they could show to their audience that they'll be proud of. And again, it's no different than why Amazon and Apple make entertainment.
So since you guys are all in on this and Michael is all in on this, what do those deals look like? How does that work? How does it work with you guys? Are you guys taking a standard commission? Are you being producers on the shows? How do you guys make any money doing this?
Yeah, it's different for every case, right? So obviously, we be producers on these projects. But and again, it's different every situation. But even if we get an outside project from a producer and it's a great fit for the brand, and they want to move forward, we don't need to be a part of that. If the producer wants us to be a part of that and they think we can add value, then of course, and obviously we'll go through the normal deal structure and terms and go down that line. But every it's hard to give you the bulk because every deal is different, right? It's just different every deal. But it's pretty standard in the same respect.
So the end goal is for Sugar 23 to be producers on the shows that they facilitate this arrangement in, ideally.
Ultimately, yeah. Ideally, yeah, ultimately, yes. But again, it's bigger than that, because we don't want to have the brand feel like that we need to be the only producers on this as well. And we don't want the creative community to think that we have to be the producers alongside this because we made the connection.
Recently, we've seen a couple of really interesting self releases with big brands, mostly influencers, or in the case of Taylor Swift, a superstar, and then going to the theaters, making their own deal. Why wouldn't a brand just ultimately make self-release? Because you say the word studio is sexier, but what do you foresee a time where Budweiser says, we're going to become our own studio, we're going to make Animal House, and we're going to make Hangover, and we're going to make Wedding Crashers, and we're going to make Caddyshack, we're going to make these movies and self-release them with the Budweiser brand? Do you ever see brands just really stepping up and taking some shots?
Yes, but they're always going to want to partner with Hollywood and creatives to do it.
Well, yeah, for sure. You would. I mean, if you partnered with Todd Phillips and made The Hangover and you're Budweiser and you're just integrated in there in a natural way, you're in essence partnering with. But I'm actually saying, do you see a time where they would take it all the way through release, but working with creatives to make their product?
Yes, I do think that could certainly happen. But from what we're seeing and hearing and dealing with, their ideal situation is that they want to end up on one of the major distributors.
Right. Yeah, they would rather slipstream into the more traditional media than try to break out and then crack yet another thing, which is the distribution model. Are you also reverse engineering these things? If producers are bringing you projects, are you thinking, oh, this could be great for this X brand that we don't necessarily have a relationship with, and then reverse engineer, reach out to those brands? Is that how these conversations are going? Or are you mostly taking in incoming calls from brands that are more open to storytelling?
No, it's across the board. We reverse engineer it too. So again, a lot of these brands, like we don't have a traditional partnership with. but we are in conversation with most of them, even if it's not an official partnership. And we actually have a project, it's a scripted series with a massive brand that we don't have an official partnership with, but they are a producer on this project, and they came at developments, and now we're obviously writing the scripts, and then we're going to go down that road. So we are talking to brands every day, even if we don't, work with them officially, to find them great projects, because we now have that brand fluency and that brand trust with a lot of these CMOs. We're constantly on the road. And I know Michael even more so, and Matt Rotundo, our the president here. They are on the road every day, meeting with brands. That's what I do now. I go to all these different events. I was just at Sundance, and they had an incredible, and that's, I think, another interesting thing to touch on as well. But to answer your question, yes, if a project aligns with the brand that we currently have a partnership with, we will go to them and look to get them involved for sure. That's happening every single day across all different formats of scripted, unscripted, television, movies, with all these different brands who have all shown interest in the space. But you're also starting to see, I went to this conference called the Brand Storytelling Conference at Sundance. It was early. It was like the Thursday, Friday, right before the festival kind of kicked off, and the amount of CMOs in that room that were there for a specific reason, to obviously meet creators and creatives, but really put themselves out there and say we're open for business. That's really what it was. It was pretty astounding to see. And then you also see a lot of CMOs and executives on LinkedIn, right? If you go on LinkedIn, you'll see a lot of them post about this space and how they're interested in getting into it, or they're having conversations, or they're announcing certain things. But then obviously you've seen the most recent ones, right? With Fanatics and Under Armour and Dick's Sporting Goods. And there's going to be a host of others. So you're starting to see a bigger brand presence at these events. Like I was at CES as well in Vegas, and Variety had, a hell of an event out there with a great lineup of people. And most of it was brands. Most of it was brands on stage with directors or producers or studio execs talking about this space specifically. So there is real buy-in. And again, a couple of years ago, it was still very, very early days. And this space was still sort of unknown and unproven. But it is wild to see the momentum now, especially on a day-to-day basis for me and our company, it's what we do every day, to see all this incredible buy-in, and just think about the market cap of some of these companies and their marketing spend. And even if, a big brand had a $200 million, marketing spend a year, that'd be kind of a modest sized brand. But even if they allocated like 10% of that to building a slate, right, they could realistically fund, again, depending on the writer and demand, all that stuff, like they could fund a very big slate of development with a bunch of different creators and producers,
Right.
to then take those out and package and sell. So that's what we're looking at here, is at scale, all these brands building their own dedicated funds, building slates with all of Hollywood and all these different producers and creators. That creates a massive opportunity to get these projects off the ground. And then you couple in, again, universities and tourism boards and states and governments and organizations all wanting to get in on this. It's a recipe that will unlock so much opportunity for everybody. And that's what we're doing every day to make sure this comes to life, because, we want to do this for the industry, really. And that's been Michael's whole thing. And that's why I joined the company. It's that mission of creating opportunity for everybody.
Yeah, it unlocks development money, which gives you a leg up to get better writers that can get paid to actually develop. So you'll have a better script. It unlocks the creativity of being able to just be you and the brand, really coming up with the best product and the best project story-wise, without a lot of other involvement from different buyers or financiers. It unlocks creating a relationship between the brand and filmmakers that could be used for shooting commercials, writing other things. It creates an ecosystem that is new to Hollywood, which is not new to Hollywood, yet new in a different way, of bringing filmmakers and writers much earlier into the process with these brands to create their own relationships, which is really, really, really fascinating and really interesting. And so when you are evangelizing this and you're going around and you're talking about it and you see this tremendous opportunity, if you're a younger producer or filmmaker, what do you think the best way, and you feel like you have something that's like so great, it's such a great piece of material that just so happened would fit into a big brand that obviously has a lot of marketing spend. How do you feel the best way for them to approach that brand would be?
I mean, first off, it's getting very smart on the brand, right? I mean, if you have a great creative, a great project, and you're having these conversations with yourself or with your team about, okay, well, this space is clearly blowing up in a great way. This brand space, who could we approach? The fastest way, and I'm sure you experienced this as an executive and running a studio, and even in your day to day, I certainly did as an agent, getting a lot of cold emails and inbound. You could tell right away that people didn't do the research, right? That didn't get smart on what you are, what you're looking to build, what you're looking to, obviously make. And it's no different with brands. The fastest way to kill your opportunity is to send a project to a CMO or a brand exec that has nothing to do with their brand. That is the fastest way for them to not only not respond to your email, but not respond to further emails that you're going to send. So I try to tell everybody, especially young filmmakers, young creatives, young producers coming up in the business that want to get involved in this space, put together that initial brand list of who you feel will be the most right. And you better come with an incredibly interesting point of view and how they can benefit, not only in development, but long-term as well. Like, what does that look like from rollout to maybe it's a festival route? What kind of assets can you create around it? Why do these characters make sense for the brand? Why is the tone, the right tone? Or what will audiences feel about the brand that will revert back to sales and more loyalty and more fandom for the brand? So when you're creating that list, just be very, very smart and very detailed, because CMOs get pitches all day long and they don't look or at half of them. But if you have an interesting take with a great subject line, and a great first impression, and you are showing how much you care and respect the brand enough to put that research in, that is your biggest chance of success, to get that next meeting, to really get into it. But it's just about getting smart in the brand. Like I said earlier, brands don't have an issue with getting projects. They get projects every day, but they get a lot of shit, right? Because it's a lot of people that send them projects that have nothing to do with their brand. And it's really a selfish thing. Right, for the creator, they send this like, well, this brand, they should want to be part of this, right? Well, they don't if it's just a blanketed email that you're sending to 10 other brands that's the same format and you're just copy and pasting, right? So get very smart on that, and you will have more success in getting more inroads and bites from brands than if you go the other way. And that's really just the thing about life, right? That's what I learned as an agent. I sort of, made my career mastering the cold email or the cold call and gone to all these rooms, because I get very specific and smart about who I'm reaching out to and what I can provide to them. It's never the other way around. Even as an agent, right? When you're looking to sell people, it's what can you do for them? How can I add service to you? That's how you stand out in that first initial point of contact. And that's what I try to tell people coming up in this industry, no matter what facet you're in. It's just do that. Be of service. Have that mentality, and you'll have so much more success. You won't burn any bridges. People will respond to you, and you'll garner more opportunity that way than just making it about yourself and being selfish, which I know, that's a bigger conversation, but I think that's something important that I try to preach every day, especially to people that call me and ask for advice about this business specifically and where it's heading and how can they benefit. It's this. If you're rooted in being of service and know your goal and know how you can help them out, you will have more success.
Several brands, to varying degrees of success and failure, have embraced AI. Where do you see that integrating into what you're talking about, given that Coca-Cola did something that didn't pan out very well, and Budweiser did? I mean, people have tried using AI, and then some people reject it, and then shows are starting to adopt some AI. How do you see AI integrating into this whole ecosystem?
I mean, look, I think even what you just said kind of says it all too. And, I was on Sora, OpenAI's, AI video feed. We can create AI videos. And, that's a good case study right there to know audience behavior, because at first, right, because it was a new thing, people were downloading it, it increased, like they had like 1 million downloads in a couple days. And now if you look at recent stats, it has completely fallen off the map, because it's cool for a second, but then you just want, it has no like soul to it, right? And that's why I believe this industry, obviously there are tools around, and you know better than I, tools around creating bigger movies and offsetting costs and implementing certain things to actually shoot the project, shoot the movie, shoot the series. But when it comes to the creative, it speaks for itself, right? Those commercials fell flat, or people kind of made fun of them and didn't embrace them at all because they knew they were AI. And you're going to start seeing that more, especially on social media. When you see a video pop up on your feed, it's going to have a verified, this is either, human generated or AI verified. I believe that's going to happen here very shortly. So people just will always want to, see other people. And the stats clearly show that. So that's why I'm bullish on this. And again, I say this a lot. As AI does make our lives more efficient, our work more efficient, and we can get stuff done quicker, and we have more time in the day, and our weekends weeks sort of shorten in a way, there would be more time for people. They'll want to spend it watching movies. They want to spend it watching television. They want to use it going to sporting events, concerts. That's why you're seeing all these record-breaking years for like concerts and festivals and experiences, because AI is not going anywhere, but it is going to create more time for people to live their life, and they want to live it being entertained. And that's why I believe as well, and brands know this, distributors know this, that's why I believe there'll be more content, right? There'll be more spending on original programming because people want it. The demand's there, right? And the brands know it too.
Yeah, and CMOs, if there are any listening to this, what we said was true, which is you're going to be associated with a feeling. Then you have to be careful with AI. If there is no feeling, you don't want to be associated with that. So brands hopefully are being very careful about where they're deploying their resources, where AI is concerned. So if you could put your prognosticator hat on for a second, where do you think this is headed in the next 5 years?
Most of the conversations that we have with chief marketing officers and C-suite, they tell us to our face that their ads don't work, right? The ads, they spend millions of dollars, right? They literally tell us to our face they do not work. So the other thing is, well, what's the alternative to that? And that's why this is becoming a great alternative for them. So in 5 years, because ads don't work, and I don't know how you view YouTube, but when I'm watching a YouTube video and I'm into it or anything, and an ad pops up, how quickly are you to press that skip ad button?
Yep.
And you kind of feel like angry. I feel angry at the brand. I'm like, what the fuck is this? You're interrupting me, right? And that's what it's always. Ads are an interruption for our entertainment. And brands know that more than ever because they have the data and analytics, and it shows that these do not fucking work anymore. So where I see this going in 5 years is major brands in every industry doing this, partnering with Hollywood, allocating serious capital towards funds, development funds, and injecting a ton of capital into this industry and the storytellers behind it. I see distributors increasing their budgets. I know, some of them increase it modestly this year. I know it's around other things like sports too, but I see those rising, and I see more and more brands in every industry, and I can foresee a world where every major brand you can think of has this arm to their company. I can, because we're already talking to most of them, and they're all looking at the space. So in 5 years, for sure. This is across all industries, universities, tour boards, governments. I'm telling you, this is the avalanche that's heading our way right now, because these are everyday conversations.
Amazing. Well, we need it for sure. Thank you, James. I really, really appreciate this. Was great. I learned a lot today, so I really thank you for that. And I like to always end the interview with best memory on set. But for you, since you have such a cool, unique perspective on this, I would ask you, of all the movies that have ever been made, if you could pick one or two where you thought that is exactly what we tell our brands, and that is exactly what we tell our filmmakers, this is how it should be done. Do you have an example of that?
There's so many that come to mind. I mean, the way that I think about things now when I look at movies, it kind of ruined me in a way too. Because now I look at movies, I'm like, oh, what brand could have easily done that? I mean, my first thought, just personally, because it made such an impact on my life, and it was the movie that I watched that ultimately, led me to Hollywood and Los Angeles was Castaway. Like, what if Wilson had a part in producing Castaway? Like, it's such an integral part of the movie, obviously. And it was that scene at the very end. I was at a crossroads in my own life. And it was that scene at the very end where Tom Hanks is in the middle of that intersection at his own crossroads. And he's like, where do I go next? So, I mean, that, and on the tourism side of things, like, there are so many, but I think about Montana and the impact that Yellowstone has had on that state. I think the number was, that show, when it came out, the first season, it generated $870 million in economic activity for the state because people watched it and they all swarmed upon Bozeman and Montana. They started buying land, small business grew, all of that. So there are so many, or like the bear in the city of Chicago. I'm from Chicago, obviously. So when I went to the city, I went to go see where the bear was shot. And it was like a Tuesday in the middle of the day. And there was a line all the way across the block, all the way down from people who watched the show that just wanted to go to the place where they shot the bear and get their Italian beef.
Wow.
Right. So there are so many examples of this working really by accident, right? So we're trying to manufacture the accident because a lot of this stuff, like the White Lotus and Four Seasons, that was an accident, right? Obviously, it was a hit show and we love it, but they didn't know it at first where it's going to be a hit. And the White Lotus, I mean, absolutely exploded in growth. And now the show is, leaving the Four Seasons and shooting somewhere else. So what if the Four Seasons actually helped produce that show, right? So that's what I think about all these projects and all these movies. Like, they could have had a brand behind it in a really cool way. And that's what we tell our brands. Like, we're trying to help them get into culture, not try to rent attention around culture. What gets you into culture? How do you create your own culture? Well, this is the medium to do it. And the best way to do it at the earliest stage alongside world-class creators. So you could have these great stories and build fandom instead of customers. You want to build fandom and loyalty. So there's so many examples that come to mind though. But Wilson for sure for Castaway.
Wow. And what a great feeling to have evoked if you're Wilson. So amazing. Thank you, James. Again, I really appreciate your time, and this has been amazing.
Of course. Thank you, Todd. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in for this episode of The Producer's Guide. If you're a fan of this podcast, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends and family. And if you got any questions about producing, send me a DM on X at Todd_Garner. I want to thank my producer, Steve Delamater. And until next week, I'm Todd Garner. See you then.